Joining us right now, it's a congressman from the Golden State of California, and he's also the ranking member on the House Select Committee for Intelligence, Devin Nunes. Congressman Nunes, thanks for joining us.
Larry, great to be with you.
All right, I'll ask you, if it comes down to Gavin Newsom and Caitlyn Jenner, are you going for the gold?
Well, right now we've got a lot of people running, Larry. We'll see what happens. One of the challenges is going to be that at the end of the day, there's going to have to be one Republican. So we've got former congressmen running. We have Mayor of San Diego running, former candidates running. So if they're going to have to draw straws or something, but clearly I'll back whoever the top Republican is who has the best shot to win. And I think you know this, and maybe your listeners don't, but there'll be two questions on the ballot. It's a yes or no. Do you want to recall Newsom or not? And then everybody else runs. And so hypothetically, if you could win with 35, 40, 50%. So it does give a shot for a Republican to run. We will see. The big question is, do any of the mega donors, Democrats, get in the race, and former prominent Democrats? So the two everybody are watching is billionaire Green New Deal freak show Steyer, who burned up a bunch of his money running in the Democratic primary. He's spent hundreds of millions of dollars to California Democrats. He's one that people are watching. And then the second one, more intriguing, is the former mayor of Los Angeles, served in the state assembly for a long time, a guy named Villaraigosa.
Anthony Villaraigosa, yeah.
Yeah, so those are the two that people are really watching that think may run. So you can imagine the politics behind the scenes right now are extremely dirty. Probably lots of knifing, lots of investigations. They for a while, they take their sights off Republicans and they'll turn against each other, and that's what's happening right now. So Newsom is circling the wagon. I'm sure contracts are being threatened. Everything you would expect to see in the Chinese Communist Party and Russia and Russian oligarchs. It happens here in California.
Well, it's not dissimilar considering the one-party rule in Beijing and Moscow and now the one-party rule in Sacramento. One other thing on California, Congressman Nunes, and I've got some other issues to take up with you, certainly, but this actually transcends the state of affairs in California, and that is the exposure of the unbelievable power and control that the teachers union has. Gavin Newsom could help himself out a lot if he actually stood up like other governors and said, enough of this crap. The kids go back to school, and the kids go back to school now, and lay that groundwork. He refuses to do it. He can't do it because he's so beholden to that teachers union. And this is something we're seeing all over the country, certainly here in the Washington area. Do you believe that the narrative on teachers unions have shifted now that they have lost favor that they had quite a bit with so many American voters, and this is an opportunity to really sort of reduce that control that they have?
Well, you have to remember, in California one-party rule, it's exactly like the Chinese Communist Party rule, and that is that if you're one of the block players, so you've got the green freaks, you've got the teachers union, you've got the public employee unions, those you do nothing without them. So when you're in a system where you're an apparatchik like Newsom, where they tell him what to say and he runs out and says it. And that's what you're seeing in Washington, D.C. with Biden and Harris. So the teachers union nationally is not as strong as they are in California, where nothing happens, no one moves, which is why I'll go back to Villaraigosa, the former mayor. This is why Newsom beat him, because Villaraigosa did not have the support of the radical Greens and the teachers union and the public employee unions. Villaraigosa was saying, I'm a moderate Democrat, and the system just crushed him, smashed him like a bug. So Biden, avatar, essentially Obama's running D.C. right now. You have another avatar in Harris, who is essentially the mouthpiece. And as you know, they won't do anything without the teachers union. So you're seeing that really start to infiltrate Washington, D.C. thinking, which is part of that communist structure.
Oh, yeah. Every horrible idea out of Sacramento is right now, it looks like it's in the hopper in the House of Representatives as a congressional bill.
Well, in some ways it's passed. So H.R. 1 is California-style communist system on steroids. Mm-hmm. It's under the name of voting rights, which means pure and total corruption. Everybody gets a ballot. Zuckerberg can put in $350 million. Taxpayers will fund it. We'll have independent commissions. Everybody can vote whenever they want. You have to take 30 days before you have to turn in your ballot. So part of what you saw in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia is what we've had in California now for the last decade, which has led to where the Democrats, the state was definitely moving blue. But, they used to get, a good Republican could usually get around 45%, 40 to 45%. Well, now you're seeing that drop below 40. That's been because of the process that's been put in place that you see in H.R. 1 that has already passed the House of Representatives in Washington and now is sitting over in the Senate. It's essentially a way that you eliminate the minority party, where the Socialist Party eliminates the minority parties. In our case, it'd be the Republican Party.
Our guest is Congressman Devin Nunes of California, and let's shift to probably what you're best known for, and that is as the former chairman and now ranking member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. There's a lot to get to there as well, sir. I want to start, I'm sure you've seen this article in the Washington Post by David Ignatius. I'll be honest, I don't read the Washington Post, but I do read when Molly Hemingway points out an article, and she's done a great write-up on this. The Nunes Memo was the report of the Republicans out of that committee when you were in the majority, sir, and you talked about many of the abuses that you had identified by the FBI and by the Justice Department in the FISA system with Carter Page and the investigation of the Trump campaign. And you were mocked, you were called names, it was a punchline in this town. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw this, Congressman Nunes, but in David Ignatius' article, they basically concede that you are 100% right all the way across the board. I mean, it was buried, but...
All right. So part of that is that they know that I watch everything. So like you, I don't read any of the fake news outlets, but what I do, if you defame me or slander me, you're immediately in the court system. So they know better than, so they couldn't write. So what they did is they're now targeting, the left is now targeting not only former Trump administration staff, but especially my staff. And so what that article is all about is they're just going after Kash Patel, who was our lead investigator, who worked with Trey Gowdy, John Ratcliffe, a very prominent former U.S. attorneys and members of Congress, and, of course, in Ratcliffe's case, Director of National Intelligence. Myself, he was the lead investigator. We drafted that memo, so he has been a target of them for a long time. And so we're not sure exactly what Ignatius is up to, but, of course, Kash is most known for that. So if you're going to write any story about Kash, so essentially he says Kash is the worst person on the planet.
Yeah.
Oh, but he happened to get this one thing right.
Yeah. So, the one thing right, and buried in there. And it's actually, by the way, that's a great lesson. They know now that you're not going to just shrug it off. You fight back and you take them to court, and so they have to make sure they dot every I and cross every T, which, Congressman Nunes, I thought journalists were supposed to do in the first place.
Well, that was probably a thing 30 or 40 years ago, but it's gradually been eliminated. And what you have is you have stenographers. So you have people that are posing as journalists that are actually just stenographers for their overlords. So in the Washington Post case, essentially an Amazon intelligence agency, for lack of a better description. You have one of the oligarchs in this country, one of the richest men in the world, who owns that. A lot of people think it's a vanity project, that some of these things are vanity projects. They're not vanity projects. They're operational intelligence agencies from top to bottom, where they can actually sway policy. So Bezos is essentially he's an oligarch owned by the radical left. He may probably dispute that. I don't know. We've never actually had him under oath to question him on this. So, this is in these third world countries, or you take a place like Russia or China, the oligarchs they think they have power until they end up dead or missing, like you see with the Chinese founder of Alibaba and others. So, that's the fate that ultimately awaits these super rich billionaires, is that ultimately they get destroyed. They get eaten by their own unless they want to take over and actually run for office and become the leader of the system. So that's really the danger that these tech oligarchs and other oligarchs get. It's kind of like I talked about at the opening here with Steyer, billionaire. He thought that all the Democrats here loved him. They took his money. and spin it like drunken sailors. A lot of grifters got rich off of them. And then he thought he was going to run for president, and he got probably about the same amount as Kamala Harris, which is zero.
Which ain't a lot.
Zero.
Our guest is Representative Devin Nunes. And one final point on your memo, and obviously, as we know now, excuse me, that it was all completely vindicated in everything that you saw in terms of abuse of the FISA system. Do those abuses still exist? Have we actually corrected those wrongs? Have the judges at the FISA courts who were lied to and their position was completely compromised and abused, have they stepped forward and said enough of this?
Well, two main points. So let's take FISA court. The FISA court actually lied to the United States, to the American people. So the FISA court said, oh, my gosh, we didn't know this was going on. It was a lie because we had informed the Supreme Court, which then informed the FISA court. When I say we, House Republicans sent all of this information to the Supreme Court that ended up the FISA court. So when the FISA court came out, they had no choice because the Inspector General Horowitz came out with his report, and all of a sudden the lead judge said, oh, my gosh, we didn't know that there was gambling going on here in the casino. It was a lie. Unfortunately, of course, it was ignored by the media, but the FISA court has very little credibility, and I say that maybe the new judge will do better, the new lead judge, but it's still a black box. Obviously, Carter Page has a lawsuit that's pending on that issue, and many others do too. As it relates to the intelligence agencies, I would just refer people to my opening statement at the Worldwide Threats hearing. It was the first time we had the FBI director and CIA director in front of us in quite some time. And I'll point out that another former staffer, Navy officer, current Navy officer, who had worked hard. He used to be general counsel on the Intelligence Committee. He worked at the National Security Council under Trump, applied and won the job to be the general counsel of the National Security Agency, the NSA, that most people know it by. Well, he got the job, and then the general that runs, General Nakasone is his name, three-star general who runs the NSA, hours after Biden took office, all of a sudden this Navy officer's career was destroyed because he was put on administrative leave by a politicized three-star general. So the NSA, which has enormous powers, now has zero support across the Republican Party because if they're targeting someone because they're a Republican and they can't work at the NSA, even though they go up the right way, and they get put under fake investigations. I have trouble telling the difference between the crooks and dirty cops at the FBI as I do with the dirty scoundrels within NSA and at the Pentagon. I mean, to destroy a young naval officer's life because at one point he worked for me. These are sick people.
It's outrageous.
They have massive powers, massive surveillance powers. So I think you have to assume the worst, that when push comes to shove, when Obama, Biden, Harris, and their team say, boy, we really need this intelligence, let's go ahead and reverse target like we already know that they did back in the Obama administration. So my guess is they're going to continue doing that. They got the perfect general right in line to do that. It's just a disgrace to
Same old deep state.
Young
Same
officers.
old deep state.
Yeah. I think worse than ever, though, Larry. Worse than ever. I mean, this is very unusual to start to outwardly target people for their political views.
Yeah.
And when you do something, this is almost unprecedented that someone is dismissed on January 20th after they went through a process to be hired. I mean, it's really scary stuff. And so, what I said, they can run, but they can't hide.
Yep.
Subpoenas are being drafted. So all of these cats who think they're in the clear, they better make sure that Pelosi remains a speaker, because come January of 23, all these scumbags are going to be subpoenaed immediately.
Congressman Devin Nunes is our guest. And one final note on this, Congressman, and that is, again, since your memo detailing the abuses of the FISA system that have now been backed up by the Inspector General's report, and I suspect will be further backed up once Mr. Durham is done with his investigation, if ever, That also means that Adam Schiff's memo was just riddled with lies. It was false, and he did that under the guise of his position on that committee as a congressman. We've seen all of the lies and the misrepresentations and outright propaganda that he puts out when he goes on cable news. I guess that's what some politicians are allowed to do. How can he still be the chairman? And is there any recourse for the Republicans in the House to actually bring him up on ethics charges the way they brought you up on ethics charges, sir?
Well, look, the challenge is they have more votes than we do. So they write the rules, and we've never seen, you want to talk a banana republic, this is the worst state the Congress has ever been in, from eliminating members of Republicans off committees just because you have the votes, to having the Capitol Police wand down every member of Congress, to putting up fencing and razor wire. They politicized the Sergeant of Arms. They politicized the attending physician's office. They politicized everything in the Capitol. So when you don't have the votes, even though it's close, we're 5 or 6 votes short. Just like I don't have subpoena power right now. So at the end of the day, there's really nothing we can do to any of these cats until we get the majority, and that's really what we have to do. We have to fight to try to win this next election, because sadly,
considering every single Democrat just voted to support and defend and encourage Maxine Waters and her despicable behavior in Minneapolis, I've got to think that the 2022 election should be a pretty good story to tell for a lot of Democrats who are on the bubble right now.
Look, it will be, but we have the challenge I've talked about with you many times, and that is we discussed the content creators, the stenographers that pose as journalists that are producing massive amounts of content.
Yep.
You plug that through Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Well, those independent voters, those people who aren't paying attention to the nuance of everything, they're not listening to your show, they're getting poisoned on a daily basis. So we have to fight through that, and it's worse than it's ever been. Then, of course, you have the politicization of the intelligence apparatus in this country, sadly, that I outlined, where they're targeting those nonpartisan positions. If they don't like your personal politics, they're eliminating. So you can imagine they're wiping out. If they're wiping out a Navy officer that used to work for me, they're going to wipe out anybody they suspect of being a Republican or even an independent, and they're going to put in left-wingers across the intelligence apparatus. We have to, unfortunately, I hate to say that, but we have to assume the worst, but hope for the best. But going into this next fight, we can't be a Pollyanna and think that, these are nonpartisan positions. They have politicized everything across this government.
Yep.
And put us in a very dangerous spot right now.
Yep, absolutely. And part of being able to fight that fight in the robust manner is to actually call out exactly what's going on, and that's why we like what Congressman Devin Nunes does. In fact, calling out what's going on is exactly what happens in his book. It's called Countdown to Socialism. It's actually a very easy and quick read, but it is full of everything you need to know to gird yourself for what's going on now and what we have to fight for the next few years. Countdown to Socialism by Devin Nunes. Congressman, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Larry, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.